Hey, what's up, everybody? So, welcome to the very first one of my coding videos. I'm going to show you anytime I find a cool little algorithm that I've seen, just a nice little exercise, I want to go over it. And I'm expecting most people here to be new to software, new to coding, new to JavaScript, just kind of figuring out what they're doing and maybe want to test their skills. Maybe you didn't go over your, algorithms that hard on whatever you've been doing. So, this is going to be just sort of a real quick thought process in how I approach different coding challenges. It's not going to be the best, right? It's kind of the first thing that came to mind, and once I make my solution, I kind of return it to you guys. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So what this challenge is trying to ask of us is to return the first recurring character in a list, right? So here I've gone ahead and set up some boilerplate. So we see that in a list where it's A, B, C, C, the first character that repeats is C, so we're going to want to return C. In this second list, we have A, B, A, B. So while both of them repeat, we're only going to want to get back A because it's the first one that repeats. And in a list where it's just A, there's no repeats, we don't want to get any repeats back, right? So if you're brand new to software, which I'm expecting most of you are, what I have here, this is a page this is probably the page that you came from, actually. It's my list of little coding algorithms that I'll have a link to in the description below if you're just finding this randomly on YouTube. And I have lots of explanations there, the code, and links back to these videos. So real quick, this is my first video with you guys, so I'm going to expect you guys to be kind of brand new. I'm using simple syntax here. I'm declaring a function. I'm calling it return first recurring, and it's going to take an array as the argument to this function. And I think it's really good to have nice descriptive names to your functions so that when you see them, it's very obvious whenever you run them, like return first recurring. You see here, I'm returning this into the console. So it's very obvious what I'm going to expect, right? So how do we go about this? What are we going to do? Well, I have an array, right? So my first thought is, well, let's set up a for loop. Like, let's actually go through this array, right? So let's start right there. So if you don't know what a for loop is, really all it is right now is a counter. So I'm going to declare some variable called I. I'm going to set it equal to 0. And then how this for loop is going to continue to count, right? It's basically just a counter. It's going to keep on setting this variable equal to something else. How long do I want to do that for? Well, I have to set it for a certain amount of time. So I'm going to say less than array dot length, and I want it to be less than because the length of an array, if you go into the documentation and check, is going to be different than the actual index of these arrays, right? So the indexes start at 0, array.length is not. So if I was to set this to equal to array.length, it would run for one too long, and that can cause issues, right? Because I'm going to get to the end of an array and there's not going to be anything there. So always use less than array.length. And we're going to count by ones, right? I++ count by ones. So for as this length starting at 0, you can always change these. This doesn't even have to be I. There's nothing special about I. I think a lot of people get caught up with for loops when they're first learning, and it's just a counter. I is just a variable. I can name this dog equals 0 and dog++, right? It doesn't mean there's nothing magical about it. So now we're set these curly braces. We're going to run a function. So now I have a counter. What do I do with this? Well, I want to look at each element in here, right? I want to look at it. I want to get it somehow. So I know that I got to go into the array, and I want to get if you look at some of the methods, right? I recommend if you're brand new to this, start going to MDN, start looking at the methods, and start reading the documentation and find out what you can do. So when I first started coding, I started looking at these and say, okay, one of these things is index of. And what index of does is it takes the very first, it finds the very first occurrence of an element. So if I'm using index of and I do index of C, right? It's going to find this very first one and say, boom, the index of C is 0, 1, 2, which is where my thinking was, hey, if it's only going to return to me the first one, if I find another one, the index of that one is not going to match that one, right? So what I'm going to want to do is, oh, I'm sorry, I got a little bit ahead of myself, array at I. So I'm setting up a counter, and I'm saying find, as I'm counting through the indexes, 0, 1, 2, 3, find the index of it. 0, 1, 2. This one's also going to return 2, which is weird, right? But at that point, when it searches here, I is going to be equal to 3, because it's going to be the third count. But the index is only going to be equal to 2, right? So there's a discrepancy there. So in that case, when it's less than 1, when the index is less than my counter I, that's when I'm going to want to do something. So if you notice my kind of syntax there, if, then, that right away, whenever you start thinking like that, if you're brand new, you should think, oh, that's an if statement, right? So if this is true. So what I did is I went ahead and I put this inside of parentheses, and that's the way this if statement works. It says if whatever is inside of this parentheses is true, do something. So if the index, if I find this item, whatever I'm looking for, and I find it before my current location where I'm counting at. So if I'm looking at location 1, 2, 3, 4, and I find it at 3, then we want to do something, because that means that's a repeat. So then I want to return some statement. So I will say, you can return anything. You return a message, you can return whatever you want. In this case, I'm just going to return, I'll just return the actual thing. So we'll go return array at I. So I'll return that letter, right? So I'm expecting C to return. I would expect C to return. I set that up earlier. And else, so if I don't find that, I'm just going to send a little message that says no repeats. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And since this is happening inside of my code, since I'm running this in my code, when I go to my page, I'll see it in the debug. So when we go, actually, I think I can just run it right here. Sorry, I will fix this in in post. Node return negatives. I'm sorry. Anyway, the reason I'm doing this is because I don't think I can share my screen. I'll have to fix that in my next edit. But if we look at this, I'm hoping you can see this. So we're going to go ahead and refresh. And right here in the console, we see, bam, expecting C to return. And I am getting A. Ooh, weird. Expecting A to return, and I'm getting A. What's going on? I made some mistake in here, right? So if the array index I is less than 1, return array at I. Oh, this is interesting. I just did this. I'm always getting A. I'm always getting A. So this is always returning as true. This is actually interesting because it kind of helps. It's going to help you guys learn too. You can see what mistakes I've made. So let's see. If the array index of array at I is less than 1. Oh, that's a typo right there. Not less than 1, less than I. Sorry. So that's software for you. Even if you prepared, I'm probably going to have to redo this video, but maybe I'll just edit it and you can see it because it's kind of fun to see when you make stupid mistakes. Bam. Perfect. Expecting C to return, C returns. So now it works. So this is a good little exercise. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hoping to make more in the future. So yeah, go ahead and like it if you liked it.